The alarm blared through the bridge of the UES Resolute, cutting through the usual hum of the ship's engines. Captain Kang Dae-won sat upright in his command chair, his eyes fixed on the holographic display that flickered to life before him. 2 red distress signals pulsed on the star map, both demanding immediate attention. "Captain, we have incoming transmissions," said Lieutenant Choi Hyun from the communication station. His voice was steady, but Dae-won could hear the tension beneath it. "First signal is from Coalition Convoy Delta 7. They're under attack by raiders in the Helios sector. 22 military personnel aboard 3 transport ships." Dae-won nodded, his mind already calculating response times and tactical options. "And the second signal?" "Civilian research vessel Aurora. 8 people aboard. They're experiencing catastrophic engine failure near the binary star system." Hyun paused, checking his instruments. "Captain, they're being pulled toward the larger star's gravity well. Their shields won't last long." Before Dae-won could respond, another voice crackled through the speakers. It was Admiral Velthar, the Saurian fleet commander whose scaled face appeared on the main screen. His reptilian eyes were cold and unblinking. "Captain Kang, you will proceed immediately to assist Convoy Delta 7. That is a direct order." The Admiral's voice left no room for discussion. "The convoy carries essential supplies for the colony worlds. Military assets take priority." Dae-won's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "Admiral, with respect, the civilian vessel has less than 15 minutes before they cross the point of no return. The convoy can hold out longer." "Your orders are clear, Captain. Coalition protocol is not optional." The transmission ended abruptly. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member knew what those orders meant. They also knew their captain well enough to recognize the conflict playing out behind his calm expression. Dae-won turned to his tactical officer. "Analysis. Can the convoy survive 40 minutes without our assistance?" "Yes, sir." "Their shields are holding. The raiders are using light weapons. No casualties reported yet. And the Aurora? 14 minutes until they're caught in the gravitational field. After that, no ship in the sector can pull them out in time." Dae-won stood up, walking to the viewport where the stars stretched endlessly before them. Somewhere out there, 8 people were watching death approach, counting down their final minutes. Among them was a young woman named Park Ji-won, a linguist who had spent her life studying alien languages, dreaming of building bridges between species. She did not know that her fate was being decided at this very moment. "Sir?" Hyun stepped closer, lowering his voice. The Admiral's orders were explicit. "I know." Dae-won turned back to face his crew. Every person on the bridge was looking at him, waiting. They trusted him. They followed him because he had never led them wrong, never asked them to do something he would not do himself. He thought about the regulations he had memorized at the academy. He thought about his career, the promotions he had earned through years of service. He thought about the admirals and councils who wrote the rules from the safety of their headquarters, never having to watch people die because of those rules. Then he thought about 8 people screaming into the void, hoping someone would hear them. "Set course for the Aurora," Dae-won said quietly. "Maximum speed." The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as the crew executed his orders. The Resolute turned sharply, its engines flaring bright as they pushed toward the dying research vessel. Hyun moved beside him. "Captain, this is insubordination. The tribunal will—" "I know what they'll do," Dae-won interrupted. "But I also know what I'll see in the mirror every morning if I let those people die when I could save them. Plot the rescue approach. We'll deal with the consequences later." The next 13 minutes were the longest of Dae-won's career. The Resolute screamed through space, pushing its engines beyond recommended limits. The crew worked with practiced efficiency, preparing the rescue shuttles and calculating the gravitational forces they would face. "Approaching the Aurora," called out the helmsman. "Captain, the gravitational shear is worse than projected. We can't get close enough with the main ship." Dae-won was already moving toward the shuttle bay. "Then I'll take a shuttle in. Hyun, you have the bridge. Get the Resolute as close as you can and be ready to pull us out fast." "Sir, you can't pilot through that yourself. The gravity fluctuations. I've flown through worse." It was not entirely true, but Dae-won did not have time for debate. He ran toward the shuttle bay, his heart pounding not with fear but with purpose. The shuttle was small, agile, and barely adequate for what he was about to attempt. Dae-won strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his hands dancing over the controls with the confidence of someone who had spent thousands of hours in flight. Resolute, I'm launching now. Keep the engines hot. The shuttle burst from the bay and immediately caught the edge of the gravitational field. The small craft shuddered and bucked like a living thing trying to throw him off. Alarms screamed warnings about structural stress and shield degradation. Day-Wan ignored them all. His eyes were locked on the Aurora, a small silver dot tumbling helplessly toward the burning star. He could see the research vessel's hull already glowing red from the heat. Aurora, this is Captain Kang Day-Wan of the UES Resolute. I'm coming to get you. Prepare for emergency docking. A voice crackled back, young and terrified. Captain, we can't stabilize for docking. Our systems are failing, then I'll match your tumble. Just be ready to move when I dock. Day-Wan pushed the shuttle harder, feeling the controls fight against him as conflicting gravitational forces tried to tear the small ship apart. What happened next would be studied in flight academies for years to come. Captain Day-Wan performed a docking maneuver that should have been impossible, matching the Aurora's chaotic rotation while compensating for gravitational shear that changed every second. His hands moved with absolute precision, his mind calculating angles and forces faster than the shuttle's computer. The docking clamp locked with a metallic clang that echoed through both vessels. Go, 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 Day-Wan shouted into the comm. The airlock opened and 8 people scrambled through, their faces pale with terror and hope. The last one through was Ji-Wan, a young woman with determined eyes who paused just long enough to meet Day-Wan's gaze. Thank you, she said simply. Save it for when we're clear. Strap in! Day-Wan sealed the airlock and fired the shuttle's engines. The small craft groaned in protest as he pulled away from the Aurora, fighting against the gravity that wanted to drag them all into the star. For a moment it seemed they would not make it. The engines were redlining, the shields were failing, and the star's heat was cooking the shuttle's hull. Then the Resolute's tractor beam caught them, and suddenly they were being pulled free, yanked away from death with seconds to spare. The shuttle landed in the bay with a crash that was more controlled fall than proper landing. Day-Wan sat in the pilot seat, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Through the viewport he could see the Aurora finally succumb to the gravity, its hull crumpling before it vanished into the star's burning embrace. 8 people were alive because of what he had done. 8 people would go home to their families, continue their research, live their lives. By the time the Resolute reached Convoy Delta 7 40 minutes later, the raiders had already fled. The military transports had sustained minor damage but no casualties. Everything had worked out perfectly, except for Captain Kang Day-Wan. The tribunal came 3 days later. Admiral Velthar presided over it personally, his scaled face showing no emotion as he read the charges. Dereliction of duty, insubordination, violation of the coalition chain of command. Ji-Wan tried to testify, tried to explain that Day-Wan had saved 8 lives, but the tribunal would not hear her. She was a civilian. Her testimony was irrelevant to military proceedings. The verdict was inevitable. Guilty on all counts. Captain Kang Day-Wan stood at attention as they stripped away his rank, his command, his career. He was demoted to lieutenant and reassigned to a supply depot on Tarsus 3, a remote mining colony where disgraced officers were sent to be forgotten. As the guards escorted him from the tribunal chamber, he passed Ji-Wan in the corridor. She was crying, but he smiled at her. It was worth it, he said softly. Don't ever think otherwise. He did not know that those words would echo in her mind for the next 5 years. He did not know that she would build her entire career on the principle he had shown her that day. He did not know that the young civilian he had saved would one day have the power to save him in return. All he knew was that he had made the right choice, and no tribunal could take that away from him. The rain on Tarsus 3 was not really rain. It was chemical runoff from the mining operations, falling from the gray sky in oily drops that left stains on everything they touched. Lieutenant Day-Wan stood at the window of his small office, watching the false rain streak down the glass, and tried not to think about how far he had fallen. 5 years had passed since the tribunal, 5 years of processing requisition forms, managing inventory databases, and watching supply ships come and go from this forgotten corner of the galaxy. The office was barely large enough for a desk and a filing cabinet. The view was of the mining facility's loading docks, where automated machinery moved containers with mechanical precision. This was his world now. This was what happened to officers who put conscience before orders. Lieutenant, we need your authorization on the medical supplies shipment. The voice belonged to Corporal Lee, one of the 3 enlisted personnel assigned to the depot. She was young, efficient, and treated Daewon with a respect he no longer felt he deserved. "Leave it on the desk. I'll review it this afternoon." Daewon did not turn from the window. He had learned that keeping busy made the days pass faster, but it did not make them matter more. After Lee left, Daewon sat at his desk and pulled up the latest news feeds from Coalition space. It was a habit he could not break, even though the news only reminded him of the life he had lost. The reports were troubling. Attacks on the frontier worlds were increasing. A mysterious faction called the Dominion had destroyed several remote outposts, and Coalition forces seemed unable to stop them. Daewon read the tactical reports with a professional eye that could not be dulled by 5 years of exile. He saw the mistakes immediately. The Coalition was using defensive formations that were predictable, outdated. They were fighting the last war instead of adapting to this new enemy. He opened a new document and began typing his analysis, detailing what the Coalition fleet should be doing differently. He had done this before many times. He would send the report up the chain of command, and it would be ignored. No one wanted advice from a disgraced logistics officer on a mining colony, but he sent it anyway because doing nothing felt worse. The days blurred together in a monotonous cycle. Wake up, process paperwork, read about battles he could not fight, write reports no one would read, sleep, repeat. Sometimes Captain Choi Hyun would visit, making the long journey from wherever his ship was stationed. Hyun had been promoted to captain after Daewon's demotion, taking command of a patrol frigate. "You shouldn't waste your leave time visiting me," Daewon told him during one such visit. They sat in the depot's small mess hall, drinking synthetic coffee that tasted like recycled oil. "You're my friend," Hyun said simply, "and you were my captain. That doesn't change just because some saurian admiral decided to make an example of you. I broke the rules. You saved 8 lives. There's a difference." Daewon smiled faintly. The Coalition doesn't see it that way. Especially not when it comes to humans. We're too emotional, too unpredictable. That's what Admiral Velthar said during the tribunal. Hyun leaned forward. The Coalition is losing this war because they're not emotional enough. They see numbers and statistics instead of people. The Dominion is destroying entire colonies, and our leaders respond with the same tired tactics. We need officers who think differently. "We need officers who follow orders," Daewon corrected. "That's what keeps a military functioning, even when those orders are wrong." The question hung in the air between them. It was the same question Daewon asked himself every night before sleep came. The messages started arriving 6 months after Hyun's visit. They were encrypted, routed through multiple relay stations to hide their origin. The first one was brief, just a few words. "You saved my life once. I haven't forgotten. What you did mattered." It was signed with only 2 letters, PJ. Daewon stared at the message for a long time. Park Ji-won, the linguist from the Aurora. He had not thought about her in years, assuming she had moved on with her life. Grateful to be alive, but with no reason to think about the disgraced captain who had rescued her. He did not respond to the message. What could he say? That he appreciated her thinking of him? That he spent his days drowning in paperwork while the galaxy burned? Instead, he deleted the message and tried to forget it. But more messages came, always encrypted, always brief. They told him small things. Ji-won had joined the Coalition's Linguistic Research Division. She was working on decrypting Dominion communications. She had made a breakthrough that helped predict their attack patterns. Daewon realized she was not just sending him messages. She was keeping him connected to the war, to the world he had lost. It was a kindness he did not deserve, but he found himself looking forward to those brief transmissions more than he cared to admit. The war grew worse. 3 Coalition worlds were attacked simultaneously in a coordinated assault that killed thousands. The fleet, still led by officers like Admiral Velthar, suffered devastating losses. Daewon watched the reports with growing frustration. He could see what needed to be done, but he was trapped on Tarsus 3 with his requisition forms and inventory databases. He wrote another tactical analysis, this one more detailed than before. He explained how the Dominion was exploiting predictable Coalition response patterns. He outlined alternative strategies based on unpredictability and rapid redeployment. He sent it through official channels, knowing it would be ignored. 3 days later, he received another encrypted message from Ji-won. This one was different. I read your analysis. You're right. I'm sharing it with people who can make a difference. Don't give up. Daewon sat back in his chair, stunned. She had access to his reports? That meant she had risen higher in the coalition hierarchy than he had imagined. Who was Park Ji-won now? He found out one evening when a sleek diplomatic shuttle landed at the depot's small landing pad. It was the kind of ship used by high-ranking civilian advisors, its hull polished to mirror brightness. Daewon watched from his office window as the airlock opened and a woman emerged. She wore the robes of a coalition civilian advisor, the kind of position that gave someone access to military councils and strategic planning sessions. But it was her face that made him step back from the window in surprise. Park Ji-won looked older, more confident, but he recognized her immediately. The frightened young woman he had pulled from the Aurora had become someone important. She found him in his office an hour later, after dealing with the official business that had brought her to Tarsus 3. She knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. "Hello, Captain," she said, then corrected herself. "Lieutenant, I'm sorry." Ji-won. Daewon stood up, suddenly conscious of how small and shabby his office must seem to someone who traveled in diplomatic shuttles. "This is unexpected." "I'm here to review supply chain logistics for the outer colonies," she explained, but her smile suggested that was not the only reason. "But I also wanted to see you. It's been 5 years." They talked for hours. Ji-won told him about her work, how she had become the Coalition's chief expert on Dominion linguistics. She had decrypted their command structure, their tactical language, even some of their cultural references. It had made her invaluable to Coalition Command. "I've been reading your tactical reports," she said. "The ones you send up the chain. They're brilliant. They're ignored. Not by everyone. Some of us are listening." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "The Coalition is changing, Daewon. Slowly, but it's happening. People are starting to realize that the old ways aren't working. We're losing this war because we're too rigid, too bound by protocol." That sounds dangerous to say out loud in Coalition headquarters. It is, but it's also true. She stood up, preparing to leave. "Change is coming. I can't tell you more than that, not yet, but I need you to be ready. Can you do that?" Daewon did not understand what she meant, but he nodded anyway. "I'll be ready." After she left, he stood at his window and watched her shuttle lift off into the gray sky. The chemical rain was falling again, but somehow it did not seem as depressing as before. Something was happening. He could feel it in the way Ji-won had spoken, in the careful choice of her words. The young civilian he had saved was planning something, and somehow it involved him. For the first time in 5 years, Lieutenant Daewon felt a spark of hope. The war continued to go badly. More worlds fell to the Dominion. More Coalition ships were destroyed. The casualty reports grew longer every day. And in a small office on Tarsus 3, a disgraced officer continued to write tactical analyses that no one officially acknowledged, but that were being read by someone with the power to use them. Daewon did not know that Ji-won was building alliances across the Coalition, gathering support for a radical restructuring of military command. He did not know that she was compiling evidence showing human tactical innovation had the highest success rates against the Dominion. He did not know that she was preparing to challenge the entire military establishment. All he knew was that Park Ji-won had told him to be ready, and after 5 years of exile, being ready was all he had left. The Coalition Council chamber was designed to intimidate. The ceiling soared high above, decorated with symbols of the 53 member species. Representatives sat in curved rows that formed a massive amphitheater, each species grouped together in pods that floated on anti-gravity platforms. At the center of it all stood a single podium where speakers presented their cases to the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. Park Ji-won stood at that podium and tried not to let her hands shake. "The Coalition has lost 12 worlds in 6 months, she said, her voice amplified to reach every corner of the vast chamber. 40,000 military personnel killed. 200,000 civilians dead or missing. Our current defensive strategies are failing." Admiral Velthar rose from the Saurian section, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. "The civilian advisor speaks of matters beyond her expertise. Military tactics are not linguistic puzzles to be decoded. No, Admiral, they're not." Ji-won met his gaze steadily. "But patterns are patterns, whether in language or in warfare. And the pattern here is clear. The Dominion adapts to every defensive formation we deploy. They predict our responses because we are predictable." A murmur ran through the chamber. The crystalline luminary representatives chimed with what might have been agreement or disagreement, their tones impossible for human ears to interpret without translation. Ji-Wan pressed on. I've analyzed every engagement with the Dominion over the past year. Coalition forces using standard defensive protocols have a survival rate of 38%. However, in the 17 skirmishes where field commanders ignored protocol and improvised their tactics, the survival rate jumps to 74%. She activated the holographic display, flooding the chamber with data. Charts and graphs materialized in the air, showing battle outcomes, casualty rates, and tactical efficiency ratings. It was 6 months of research, compressed into visual form that even the most skeptical representative could not easily dismiss. You propose we abandon centuries of proven military doctrine based on 17 minor skirmishes? Velthar's voice dripped with disdain. This is precisely the kind of emotional, impulsive thinking that makes humans unsuitable for command positions. Ji-Wan had expected this. She had prepared for it. I propose we create a test program, a single fleet, hand-picked for tactical innovation rather than seniority. Give them 6 months to prove that adaptive strategies can succeed where traditional methods have failed. If they fail, you lose nothing. If they succeed, you gain a template for survival. The debate that followed lasted for 7 hours. Species representatives argued about military tradition versus innovation, protocol versus improvisation, and the underlying question that no one wanted to say aloud: could humans be trusted with real authority? Ji-Wan stood at the podium through it all, answering questions, defending her data, and refusing to back down. She had spent years building toward this moment, cultivating relationships with progressive representatives from various species, gathering evidence, and waiting for the right time to strike. The Dominion's recent victories had created that moment. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the Coalition was finally afraid enough to consider radical change. Captain Choi Hyun sat in the observation gallery, watching Ji-Wan face down the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He had known about her plan for months, had secretly fed her tactical data from his own experiences fighting the Dominion. Now he watched her put everything on the line for an idea that most of the military establishment considered insane. She's incredible, whispered Commander Yoon, sitting beside him. Did you know she was going to do this? Yes, Hyun admitted. She's been planning it for years. It'll never pass. Velthar has too much influence. Hyun smiled slightly. Don't underestimate her. She doesn't make moves unless she knows she can win. The vote came near midnight after hours of parliamentary maneuvering. The proposal required a 2/3 majority to pass. Ji-Wan stood at the podium, exhausted but unbowed as the votes were tallied on the holographic display. The count climbed slowly. 60% in favor, 63%, 65%. It stalled there, agonizingly close but not close enough. Then Elder Kresh of the Luminari changed his vote. The ancient crystalline being had sat silent through the entire debate, but now his chiming voice rang through the chamber. I vote in favor. Our children are dying because we cling to the comfort of tradition. It is time to try something new. The final tally showed 67% in favor. The proposal passed by a margin of 3 votes. Ji-Wan felt her knees go weak with relief, but she kept her expression neutral. She had won the first battle, but the war was just beginning. The next phase happened quickly. The Coalition Council created the position of Director of Adaptive Fleet Operations, a civilian oversight role designed to keep the new experimental fleet from being controlled by the traditional military hierarchy. The position came with authority equivalent to an admiral, the power to select personnel, and the responsibility of proving the entire concept worked. Park Ji-Wan was the only candidate seriously considered for the role. She accepted without hesitation. Admiral Velthar approached her after the ceremony, his reptilian eyes unreadable. You have made powerful enemies today, Director Park. I hope your confidence is justified. I hope so too, Admiral, Ji-Wan replied calmly. Because if I'm wrong, a lot more people are going to die. They will die anyway. War is death. The question is whether you will add military chaos to the carnage. He leaned closer. I know who you plan to put in command of your fleet. The disgraced human officer on Tarsus III, your rescue from 5 years ago. Ji-Wan did not flinch. Lieutenant Kang Dae-Wan is one of the finest tactical minds in the Coalition. His record before the incident proves that. His record after the incident proves he cannot follow orders. His record proves he makes the right choices even when they're difficult. That's exactly what we need right now. Velthar straightened. We shall see, Director. I will be watching your experiment very closely. The moment it fails, I will be there to shut it down. After he left, Choi Hyun joined Ji-won in the now empty council chamber. That went about as well as could be expected. Velthar is going to fight you every step of the way. Let him fight. I have the authority now. Ji-won looked up at the symbols representing the 53 species. Did you secure the ship? The Defiant is ready. New construction, fastest engines in the fleet, and equipped with every experimental weapon system we could fit on her. She's everything you asked for. Good. Now comes the hard part. Getting Daewon to accept command. Ji-won smiled. No, he'll accept. The hard part is building a crew that can actually make this work. We need officers who think like Daewon. People who've been punished for being innovative. And we need them from multiple species to prove this isn't just a human power grab. Over the next 3 weeks, Ji-won reviewed personnel files from across the entire coalition military. She was looking for specific patterns. Officers who had been reprimanded for questioning orders. Enlisted personnel known for improvisation. Anyone whose record showed creative thinking punished by rigid superiors. She found them scattered throughout the fleet. A Luminary tactical officer who had been demoted for using civilian ships as decoys. A Saurian engineer who had been censured for modifying weapon systems without authorization. A human pilot who had been court-martialed for abandoning formation to rescue a damaged ship. Each one had been punished for the same quality. Ji-won needed the ability to see solutions outside the manual. She sent personal messages to each of them, offering a chance at redemption and a warning that it would be dangerous. Most accepted immediately. The ones who hesitated were the ones she wanted most. The ones who understood the weight of what she was asking. But there was one name she saved for last. One officer whose file she had memorized. Whose tactical reports she had read dozens of times. Whose choice 5 years ago had changed her entire life. Lieutenant Kang Dae-won, currently assigned to supply depot operations on Tarsus 3. Ji-won composed the message carefully. It was not a request or an invitation. It was an order, official and binding, transmitted through proper channels with all the authority of her new position. Lieutenant Kang Dae-won, you are hereby ordered to report to Coalition Command Headquarters for immediate reassignment. Transport will arrive at Tarsus 3 within 24 hours. This is not a request. She sent the message and then sent a second one, encrypted and personal, using the same routing she had used for years. I kept my promise. I told you to be ready. It's time. Ji-won, on Tarsus 3, Daewon read both messages and felt his world shift. He stood in his small office looking at the orders that would take him away from 5 years of exile, and wondered if he was ready for whatever came next. Lieutenant Choi Hyun sent him a third message. This one brief and to the point, about time. She kept her promise. See you at headquarters. Daewon packed his few belongings that night. Corporal Lee and the other depot personnel gave him a quiet farewell, knowing better than to make a fuss about something that might still fall apart. As the transport ship lifted off from Tarsus 3 the next morning, Daewon looked down at the gray world that had been his prison for 5 years. The chemical rain was falling again, streaking the viewport with oily residue. He did not know exactly what awaited him at Coalition Command. He did not know that the young civilian he had saved was now one of the most powerful people in the Coalition. He did not know that she had spent 5 years building toward this moment, constructing an elaborate plan that hinged on giving him a second chance. All he knew was that Park Ji-won had told him to be ready, and now she was calling him back to the war. The transport jumped to faster-than-light speed, and Tarsus 3 vanished behind them. Coalition Command Headquarters orbited Earth like a massive metal crown, its structure visible from the surface as a bright star that never moved. Daewon had been here only once before, 5 years ago, for his tribunal. He had not expected to return except perhaps for his funeral. The transport docked at a civilian bay, which struck him as odd, until he remembered that his orders had come from a civilian authority. He was met by a young ensign who escorted him through corridors he remembered too well, past memorial walls bearing names of officers killed in action. Director Park is waiting for you in conference room 7, the ensign said, leaving him at a sealed door. Day One straightened his uniform. It was the same rank insignia he had worn for 5 years. Lieutenant, 2 silver bars that felt like weights on his collar. He knocked once and entered. The conference room was large, designed for strategic planning sessions. Holographic displays covered 3 walls, currently showing ship deployments and Dominion attack patterns. At the center table sat Park Ji-won, wearing robes that marked her as a coalition director, an authority position he barely understood. She stood when he entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other. The last time they had spoken, she was leaving Tarsus 3 in a diplomatic shuttle, telling him cryptically to be ready. Lieutenant Kang Dae-won reporting as ordered. Director. He kept his voice formal, professional. Ji-won smiled. We're past that, don't you think? Sit down, Dae-won. We have a lot to discuss. He sat and she activated one of the holographic displays. It showed a ship sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. This is the UES Defiant, Ji-won said. Flagship of the first Adaptive Response Fleet. New construction incorporating every tactical lesson we've learned from fighting the Dominion. She's fast, heavily armed, and designed for unconventional operations. Dae-won studied the specifications scrolling beside the image. She's beautiful. Who's commanding her? You are. If you accept. The words hung in the air. Dae-won looked at Ji-won, trying to process what she had just said. That's not possible. I'm a disgraced lieutenant assigned to supply depot operations. You were a disgraced lieutenant. As of this morning, you're being promoted to captain and given command of the most important ship in the coalition fleet. Ji-won leaned forward. I've been given authority to restructure fleet command, to build a force that can actually defeat the Dominion. I need officers who think differently, who value mission success over career advancement. I need you. Ji-won, I was court-martialed for insubordination. The military establishment hates me. Admiral Velthar would rather see the coalition burn than give me a command. Admiral Velthar doesn't get a vote. I do. Her voice was firm. You were punished for making the right choice when protocol demanded you make the wrong one. That quality, that moral courage is exactly what we need now. The coalition is losing this war because we follow rules written for different enemies. We need people who can break those rules intelligently. Dae-won stood and walked to the viewport looking out at Earth below. You're asking me to do what got me demoted in the first place. I'm asking you to be who you've always been. A captain who sees people instead of statistics, who values lives over regulations. She joined him at the viewport. 5 years ago, you saved 8 civilians when protocol said to save military assets. You were right then. We need you to be right again now. He turned to face her. Why me? There are other officers with clean records who think creatively. Because you've already paid the price for doing the right thing. You know what it costs, and you did it anyway. That makes you trustworthy in a way unblemished officers aren't. Ji-won's eyes were intense. And because I know you, Dae-won. I know you'll never sacrifice people to save your career. That's the kind of captain we need. What about the crew? No one's going to want to serve under a disgraced officer. They will when they meet the crew I've assembled. Ji-won activated another display, showing personnel files. I've been recruiting for 3 months. Every officer and crew member on the Defiant was selected for the same reason you were. They prioritize mission success over protocol compliance. Some were demoted like you. Others were passed over for promotion because they questioned their superiors. All of them are brilliant, and all of them are tired of watching good people die because of bad tactics. Dae-won scrolled through the files. He recognized some names, officers he had served with years ago. Others were unfamiliar, but their records told similar stories. Talented people punished for thinking independently. Commander Choi Hyun will be your first officer, Ji-won continued. He requested the assignment specifically. Hyun made captain. Why would he accept a demotion? Because he believes in what we're doing. And because he never stopped believing in you. The door opened and Hyun walked in, grinning broadly. Surprised to see me, sir? Dae-won felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. You're insane. You threw away your command for this? I threw away nothing. I chose to serve under the best captain I've ever known. Hyun extended his hand. Welcome back, Captain Kang. The formal ceremony happened 2 days later. Dae-won stood before a small gathering of officers while Ji-won pinned the captain's insignia to his collar, replacing the lieutenant's bars he had worn for 5 years. There was no admiral present, no traditional military pomp. This was a civilian-authorized promotion, and the military establishment made their disapproval clear through their absence. Day One did not care. He had his ship, his crew, and a mission that mattered. The Defiant was everything the specifications promised. She was smaller than a traditional battlecruiser but faster and more maneuverable. Her weapon systems could be reconfigured on the fly, adapting to different tactical situations. The crew of 230 included humans and aliens working together without the rigid species hierarchies that defined most coalition ships. Day One spent 2 weeks drilling the crew, developing new tactical doctrines based on speed and unpredictability. G1 attended some sessions, observing but rarely interfering. She handled the politics while he handled the war. The arrangement worked because they trusted each other completely. Admiral Velthar visited the Defiant once. His inspection clearly intended to find flaws. He walked through the ship with barely concealed contempt, questioning every unconventional modification and protocol deviation. "This ship is a disaster waiting to happen," he told Day One on the bridge. "Your crew is undisciplined, your tactics are unproven, and your command authority is questionable at best." "Noted, Admiral. Is there anything else?" Velthar's eyes narrowed. "You will fail, Captain. And when you do, Director Park's entire experiment will be shut down. I suggest you remember that before you indulge in more heroics." After he left, Hyun appeared beside Day One. "He really hates you. He hates what I represent, change, the idea that the old ways might be wrong. Are you worried?" Day One looked around his bridge at the crew working with efficient purpose. "I'm terrified, but that doesn't change what we need to do." The call came 3 weeks into the Defiant's operational status. A Dominion force was attacking New Pyongyang, an agricultural colony with 3 million inhabitants. Traditional coalition forces were too far away to respond in time. Estimated civilian casualties, 90% of the population. Ji-won contacted Daiwan directly. "This is what we built the Defiant for. Can you get there in time?" Day-One checked the tactical display. "Barely. It'll push the engines past recommended limits. Then push them. 3 million people are counting on you." She paused. "I'm authorizing the mission." "Make it work, Day One." The Defiant jumped to faster than light speed, her engines screaming as they exceeded design specifications. The crew worked with practiced efficiency, preparing weapon systems and running combat simulations during the journey. Hyun stood beside Daewon on the bridge. "This feels familiar. Like the Aurora? Except with 3 million lives instead of 8. "No pressure." Daewon smiled grimly. "At least this time I have proper authorization. You had proper authorization last time too. From your conscience." The Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light speed at the edge of New Pyongyang's system. 3 Dominion warships were in orbit, bombarding the colony's cities with systematic precision. Their ships were larger than the Defiant, better armed by conventional standards. But they were following predictable patterns, standard siege tactics designed for maximum destruction with minimum risk. Daewon saw the patterns immediately. Tactical, give me firing solutions on all 3 targets. Helm, prepare for rapid maneuver sequence Delta 7. Engineering, I need every ounce of power you can give me. Sir, Delta 7 puts us in crossfire between all 3 enemy ships, the tactical officer warned. Exactly. They're not expecting us to do something that stupid. Daewon leaned forward in his command chair. That's our advantage. We do things no sane captain would attempt. Attack pattern on my mark. Mark! The Defiant screamed forward, using New Pyongyang's magnetic field to mask its approach. The crew executed maneuvers that would have gotten them court-martialed on any traditional ship. Breaking formation, ignoring safety protocols, and fighting with a creativity that turned warfare into art. Daewon was everywhere at once, calling out orders, adjusting tactics on the fly, and trusting his crew to execute impossible maneuvers. They fought like demons, like people who had something to prove. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, all 3 Dominion ships were destroyed or fleeing. The Defiant had taken damage but nothing critical, and New Pyongyang was saved. 3 million people who would have died were still alive. The crew cheered on the bridge, but Daewon felt only exhaustion. He had proven Ji-won right. The Defiant could do what traditional forces could not. But he also knew this was just the beginning. Admiral Velthar and his faction would not be convinced by one victory. They would wait for the Defiant to fail, and they would use that failure to destroy everything Ji-Wan had built. Ji-Wan contacted him an hour later, her face on the main view screen. You did it. 3 million lives saved. The Council is already talking about expanding the program. One battle doesn't win a war. No, but it proves the concept. You proved today that adaptive tactics work. She smiled. Welcome back, Captain Kang. The Coalition needs you. Daewon looked at his crew, exhausted but proud. He thought about the 5 years on Tarsus 3, the tribunal that had stripped his rank and the civilian he had saved who had just given him the chance to save millions more. Thank you, Ji-Wan, for believing when no one else did. You made it easy. All I did was give you the opportunity. You did the rest. The transmission ended and Daewon turned to his crew. They had proven themselves today, but the real test was still coming. The victory at New Pyongyang changed everything and nothing. The Coalition Council praised Captain Daewon publicly, while Admiral Velthar and his supporters worked behind the scenes to undermine the Adaptive Response Fleet's credibility. 3 million saved lives could not be dismissed, but one victory could be called luck. Daewon knew they needed more than luck. They needed to understand their enemy. Ji-Wan arrived at the Defiant 2 weeks after the battle, bringing encrypted files that she spread across the conference room table like pieces of a puzzle. Daewon, Hyun, and the senior officers gathered around as she explained what her linguistic team had discovered. The Dominion isn't what we thought, Ji-Wan began. We assumed they were conquerors expanding their territory, but their communications tell a different story. They're refugees. Refugees who destroy entire colonies? Hyun's skepticism was evident. Desperate refugees. They're fleeing something catastrophic in their home region. A weapon system, ancient and automated, that's sterilizing their space sector by sector. Ji-Wan activated a hologram showing star charts with dead zones spreading like infection. They see Coalition territory as their only chance for survival. They're willing to kill us all to secure living space. Daewon studied the hologram, his tactical mind processing implications. If they're running from something worse, destroying them won't end the threat. Whatever is chasing them will eventually reach our space anyway. Exactly. Which is why the Coalition Command wants to send an expeditionary force deep into Dominion territory, find out what they're running from, and either negotiate a solution or eliminate the actual threat. Ji-Wan looked directly at Daewon. They want you to lead it. The silence in the room was heavy. Every officer understood what she was describing. A suicide mission into enemy territory with no guaranteed support and almost no chance of return. How many ships? Daewon asked quietly. 5. The Defiant plus 4 support vessels. Volunteers only. Admiral Velthar approved this? Ji-Wan's expression went dark. He's against it. He wanted to send a full battle group using traditional tactics. But the Council overruled him based on your success at New Pyongyang. You've proven that adaptive tactics work. Now they want to see if they can win the war. Hyun leaned back in his chair. This isn't about proving tactics. They're sending us out there to die so Velthar can shut down the entire program. Probably, Ji-Wan admitted. But it's also our best chance to end this war. If we can solve the Dominion problem, we save billions of lives on both sides. Daewon stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient weapon was killing entire civilizations, and the Coalition wanted him to stop it with 5 ships and a crew of volunteers. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of mission where conventional thinking would fail. I'll do it, he said, on one condition. We do this my way with complete operational freedom. No second-guessing from command, no orders to retreat when things look bad. Ji-Wan hesitated. Daewon, I can give you tactical freedom, but I can't promise there won't be political pressure. Velthar will look for any excuse to recall the mission. Then you'll need to handle the politics while I handle the mission, like we've been doing. He turned to face her. Can you buy me the time I need? I'll try, but if this goes wrong, it ends both our careers, maybe our lives. That's the job, Daewon said simply. Build something worth dying for and hope you don't have to. The expeditionary fleet assembled over the next month. 4 ships joined the Defiant, 2 fast frigates, a science vessel, and a supply ship. Every crew member volunteered, knowing full well they might never return. The Coalition watched with mixture of hope and morbid curiosity, waiting to see if the experimental fleet would succeed or prove Admiral Velthar right. The night before departure, Velthar requested a private meeting with Daewon. They met in a secure room at Coalition Command. The old Saurian admiral and the human captain who represented everything he opposed. "I still believe I was right to convict you 5 years ago," Velthar said without preamble. "You broke the chain of command, violated military protocol, and undermined fleet cohesion. I saved 8 lives," Day One replied calmly. "Yes, you did." Velthar's reptilian eyes studied him. "And now you're attempting to save billions." "I understand the mathematics, Captain. I simply question whether one man's judgment should supersede the collective wisdom of military doctrine. Sometimes it has to. Doctrine is written for known situations. The Dominion is something new, which makes your mission either brilliant or suicidal." Velthar stood. "I hope you return alive, Captain. Not because I like you or approve of your methods, but because I am beginning to understand that being right and being effective are not always the same thing. Prove me wrong. Prove that your way works." It was as close to a blessing as Day One would get from the old admiral. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed 3 days later, leaving Coalition space behind. The journey into Dominion territory took 2 weeks, each day bringing them deeper into enemy-controlled space. They encountered Dominion patrols twice, avoiding detection through unconventional routes that no traditional fleet would risk. What they found at the Dominion's home region was worse than anything Jiwan's analysis had suggested. Entire star systems were dead, their planets reduced to lifeless rocks. The weapon system responsible was massive, a network of automated platforms that had been functioning for thousands of years, methodically sterilizing space according to programming no one understood. Day One's science team analyzed the weapon platforms and discovered something crucial. They targeted only advanced civilizations that met specific technological thresholds. The Dominion had crossed that threshold. The Coalition would eventually cross it too. "This thing will come for us whether we fight the Dominion or not," Hyun said, staring at the sensor readings. "We're all doomed unless we shut it down." "Then we shut it down," Day One said. The victory at New Pyongyang changed everything and nothing. The Coalition Council praised Captain Day One publicly, while Admiral Velthar and his supporters worked behind the scenes to undermine the Adaptive Response Fleet's credibility. 3 million saved lives could not be dismissed, but one victory could be called luck. Day One knew they needed more than luck. They needed to understand their enemy. Jiwan arrived at the Defiant 2 weeks after the battle, bringing encrypted files that she spread across the conference room table like pieces of a puzzle. Day One, Hyun, and the senior officers gathered around as she explained what her linguistic team had discovered. "The Dominion isn't what we thought," Jiwan began. "We assumed they were conquerors expanding their territory, but their communications tell a different story. They're refugees. Refugees who destroy entire colonies." Hyun's skepticism was evident. Desperate refugees. They're fleeing something catastrophic in their home region. A weapon system, ancient and automated, that's sterilizing their space sector by sector. Jiwan activated a hologram showing star charts with dead zones spreading like infection. "They see Coalition territory as their only chance for survival. They're willing to kill us all to secure living space." Day One studied the hologram, his tactical mind processing implications. If they're running from something worse, destroying them won't end the threat. Whatever is chasing them will eventually reach our space anyway. Exactly. Which is why the Coalition Command wants to send an expeditionary force deep into Dominion territory, find out what they're running from, and either negotiate a solution or eliminate the actual threat. Ji-won looked directly at Dae-won. "They want you to lead it." The silence in the room was heavy. Every officer understood what she was describing. A suicide mission into enemy territory with no guaranteed support and almost no chance of return. "How many ships?" Dae-won asked quietly. 5. The Defiant plus 4 support vessels. Volunteers only. Admiral Velthar approved this. Ji-won's expression went dark. He's against it. He wanted to send a full battle group using traditional tactics. But the Council overruled him based on your success at New Pyongyang. You've proven that adaptive tactics work. Now they want to see if they can win the war. Hyun leaned back in his chair. This isn't about proving tactics. They're sending us out there to die so Velthar can shut down the entire program. Probably, Ji-won admitted, but it's also our best chance to end this war. If we can solve the Dominion problem, we save billions of lives on both sides. Dae-won stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient weapon was killing entire civilizations, and the Coalition wanted him to stop it with 5 ships and a crew of volunteers. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of mission where conventional thinking would fail. "I'll do it," he said, "on one condition. We do this my way, with complete operational freedom. No second-guessing from command. No orders to retreat when things look bad." Jiwan hesitated. "Day one, I can give you tactical freedom, but I can't promise there won't be political pressure. Velthar will look for any excuse to recall the mission. Then you'll need to handle the politics while I handle the mission, like we've been doing." He turned to face her. "Can you buy me the time I need?" "I'll try. But if this goes wrong, it ends both our careers. Maybe our lives. That's the job," Day One said simply. "Build something worth dying for and hope you don't have to." The expeditionary fleet assembled over the next month. 4 ships joined the Defiant. 2 fast frigates, a science vessel, and a supply ship. Every crew member volunteered, knowing full well they might never return. The Coalition watched with mixture of hope and morbid curiosity, waiting to see if the experimental fleet would succeed or prove Admiral Velthar right. The night before departure, Velthar requested a private meeting with Day One. They met in a secure room at Coalition Command, the old Saurian admiral and the human captain who represented everything he opposed. "I still believe I was right to convict you 5 years ago," Velthar said without preamble. "You broke the chain of command, violated military protocol, and undermined fleet cohesion. I saved 8 lives," Day One replied calmly. "Yes, you did." Velthar's reptilian eyes studied him. "And now you're attempting to save billions." "I understand the mathematics, Captain. I simply question whether one man's judgment should supersede the collective wisdom of military doctrine. Sometimes it has to. Doctrine is written for known situations. The Dominion is something new, which makes your mission either brilliant or suicidal." Velthar stood. "I hope you return alive, Captain. Not because I like you or approve of your methods, but because I am beginning to understand that being right and being effective are not always the same thing. Prove me wrong. Prove that your way works." It was as close to a blessing as Day One would get from the old admiral. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed 3 days later, leaving Coalition space behind. The journey into Dominion territory took 2 weeks, each day bringing them deeper into enemy-controlled space. They encountered Dominion patrols twice, avoiding detection through unconventional routes that no traditional fleet would risk. What they found at the Dominion's home region was worse than anything G1's analysis had suggested. Entire star systems were dead, their planets reduced to lifeless rocks. The weapon system responsible was massive, a network of automated platforms that had been functioning for thousands of years, methodically sterilizing space according to programming no one understood. Day One's science team analyzed the weapon platforms and discovered something crucial. They targeted only advanced civilizations that met specific technological thresholds. The Dominion had crossed that threshold. The Coalition would eventually cross it too. "This thing will come for us whether we fight the Dominion or not," Hyun said, staring at the sensor readings. "We're all doomed unless we shut it down." "Then we shut it down," Day One said. "With 5 ships? That weapon network destroyed an entire civilization. Because they fought it conventionally. We won't." Before they could attack the weapon system, a Dominion battleship intercepted them. Day One prepared for combat, but the Dominion commander opened communications instead of firing. Through G1's linguistic work transmitted in real time from Coalition Command, they established the first peaceful contact between the Coalition and Dominion forces. The Dominion commander was pragmatic. Her people were dying, and pride was a luxury they could not afford. "Help us destroy the weapon network and we will stop attacking your territory," she proposed. "We do not wish to be conquerors. We wish to survive." Day One made the offer to Coalition Command. Admiral Velthar's response was immediate and absolute. "Withdraw immediately. Contact with the enemy was not authorized. Any alliance would be considered treason." G1 sent a private message moments later. "I'm using my authority to override Velthar. You have permission to proceed, but know that this ends my career. Make it count." Day One stared at the message, understanding what she was sacrificing. She had built her entire position on political skill and careful alliances. By defying Velthar directly, She was destroying everything she had created, just like he had done 5 years ago when he saved 8 civilians instead of following orders. Commander Hyun, contact the Dominion fleet. Tell them we accept their terms. We attack the weapon system together. The combined Coalition Dominion force struck the weapon network 3 days later. It was a battle unlike anything in recorded history. 2 former enemies fighting side by side against a common threat. The weapon system's automated defenses were devastating. Daewon lost 2 of his 5 ships in the first hour. But he had something the ancient weapon designers had never anticipated: unpredictability combined with desperation. Daewon coordinated attacks that made no tactical sense, using Dominion ships as bait while Coalition vessels struck from impossible angles. He sacrificed optimal firing positions for speed, abandoned defensive formations for pure aggression, and turned warfare into chaos that the weapon system could not model. The Defiant took catastrophic damage, her hull breached in 3 sections, engines failing. But Daewon pushed her forward, leading a final strike against the weapon network's central control hub. The explosion when the hub died lit up the surrounding space like a newborn star. Daewon's fleet limped back to Coalition space 2 weeks later, escorted by Dominion ships that were now allies instead of enemies. The Defiant barely held together, her crew exhausted and mourning the friends they had lost. They arrived to find themselves facing another tribunal. Admiral Velthar presided once again, his expression unreadable as he read the charges against both Captain Daewon and Director Park Ji-won. Unauthorized alliance with enemy forces, violation of direct orders, insubordination, on a scale that threatened the entire chain of command. The evidence was overwhelming. Both were technically guilty, but the Dominion had sued for peace. The weapon network was destroyed. Billions of lives on both sides were saved. 36 Coalition worlds were no longer under threat. The tribunal chamber was packed with representatives from every Coalition species, all watching to see what would happen when the rules conflicted with results. Velthar spoke slowly, carefully. I find the accused guilty of all charges as written. They violated military law, ignored direct orders, and placed personal judgment above institutional authority. Ji-won stood beside Daewon, both of them at attention, preparing for the verdict that would end their careers. However, Velthar continued, the law exists to protect lives and preserve civilization. When following the law would destroy what it is meant to protect, those who find another way are not criminals. They are the only ones paying attention. He looked directly at Daewon. Captain Kang, 5 years ago I convicted you for saving 8 civilians. I believed then, and stated publicly, that you were too emotional and unpredictable for command. I was wrong. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. I was not wrong about the law, Velthar continued, raising his voice. You did violate protocol, but I was wrong about what matters more than protocol. You understood something that I, in my adherence to regulation, failed to see. That 8 lives saved can change the course of history. The linguist you rescued became the architect of military reform. The reform you championed saved billions. The law is important, but knowing when to break it is wisdom. He stood formally. All charges are dismissed. Furthermore, I recommend that Captain Kang Daewon be promoted to Commodore and given command of the new joint Coalition Dominion Exploration Fleet, and I recommend that Director Park Ji-won be appointed to the Coalition Council as humanity's first permanent representative. The chamber exploded in debate, but the recommendations carried Velthar's authority. Within weeks, both were confirmed. 6 months later, Commodore Daewon stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, a jointly built facility where Coalition and Dominion ships docked side by side. Ji-won joined him, now wearing the formal robes of a council member. Do you regret it? She asked. The exile, the years you lost, everything you went through? Daewon watched ships from former enemy fleets working together in space. I regret that the system made it necessary. But the choice itself? Never. 8 civilians mattered. 3 million colonists mattered. Billions who won't die in pointless wars matter. That's why I tracked down a disgraced logistics officer on a mining colony, Ji-won said. Not because I owed you, but because the galaxy needed someone who understood that every life has value. You became my commander, Daewon observed. No, I became someone who could give you the freedom to do what you do best, make impossible choices and somehow make them work. She smiled. You saved my life 5 years ago. I'd like to think I returned the favor. You did more than that. You changed the entire galaxy. We changed it together. G1 looked out at the peaceful scene before them. That's what you taught me that day on the Aurora. That one person making one right choice can change everything. You just have to be willing to pay the price. Daewon nodded slowly. The price had been high. 5 years of exile, a destroyed career, friends lost in battle. But standing here, watching former enemies cooperate, seeing a future where the Coalition and Dominion built something better together, he knew the price had been worth paying. Sometimes the right choice was the one that broke all the rules. Sometimes saving one person was worth more than following 1,000 regulations. And sometimes the civilian you rescued became the commander who saved you back. Not because of debt, but because you had shown them what leadership really meant. Captain Kang Daewon had learned that lesson when he chose 8 lives over military protocol. Director Park Ji-won had learned it watching him make that choice. Together they had taught it to an entire galaxy. And the galaxy was better for it.